A husband plans to steal his disabled wife's fortune with the help of her manipulative mother, leaving her at the hospital. But when he returns home and opens the door, he's hit with a shocking surprise. What happens next is something no one could expect. Sophia Parker was a woman of ambition and drive. In her late 20s, she had already achieved what many only dreamed of. Her restaurant, Parker's Bistro, located in the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina, was a beloved hotspot, famous for its intimate atmosphere and exquisite culinary offerings. From the outside, her life appeared perfect. An incredibly successful business owner, a fiancé she adored, and a loving family. But beneath the surface, things were not always as they seemed. Sophia's story was one of inheritance and hard work. After the passing of her father, she had inherited his fortune. A combination of land, investments, and most significantly, a business empire. Rather than letting the wealth define her, she poured herself into building the family restaurant into a success. It wasn't easy, but Sophia was determined to honor her father's legacy while creating her own path. She was proud of what she had built, but there was something, or rather, someone, who made her heart sing beyond her professional achievements. Ethan Blackwood. Ethan, a private security contractor in his early 30s, was everything Sophia had ever wanted in a partner. They had been together for almost 3 years, and their relationship was everything one could wish for: supportive, loving, and full of promise. The couple had even set a date for their wedding, and the thought of their future together filled Sophia with happiness. Sophia had always been the picture of confidence. She carried herself with an easy grace, a smile that could brighten a room, and an unyielding work ethic that inspired all who knew her. But there was more to Sophia than just a successful restaurant owner. There was a depth to her, a quiet vulnerability that only Ethan had truly seen. He was the one she confided in, the one who understood her better than anyone. She had no doubt they were meant to be together. However, that sense of certainty was about to be shattered in ways she could never have imagined. It started as a typical evening. The restaurant had been buzzing with customers, the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation filling the air. Sophia had worked tirelessly, overseeing every detail, ensuring the menu was perfect, the wine pairings were flawless, and the ambience was just right. By the time she clocked out, it was already past midnight. Exhausted but content, Sophia climbed into her car and began the drive home, eager to get some rest before the chaos of another day. But fate had other plans. As Sophia made her way down the winding, fog-drenched streets of Charlotte, a sudden, fierce storm rolled in. The rain came down in torrents, and the fog made visibility nearly impossible. Sophia's headlights barely cut through the mist as she maneuvered through the slick, treacherous roads. In that moment, all she could think about was getting home to the man she loved. She didn't see the car coming from the opposite direction. The speeding vehicle, its driver barely able to keep control, swerved into her lane. The crash was violent and instantaneous. Sophia's world spun as the impact sent her car into a violent spin, skidding off the road and crashing into a nearby tree. The sound of twisting metal and shattering glass echoed in her ears, and everything went black. When Sophia awoke, the sterile smell of a hospital room assaulted her senses. Blinking against the harsh white light, her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what had happened. The pain was immediate and sharp, overwhelming her in waves. Her body felt different, unnaturally heavy, almost alien to her. It took her a moment to register the machine beeping steadily beside her and the feeling of a nurse gently adjusting her drip. Sophia, a familiar voice called softly. She turned her head, finding Ethan sitting by her side, his face pale with worry. His usual confidence was replaced by a look of sheer anxiety. It wasn't the face of the man she knew, the man who always held himself so perfectly composed. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked weakly, her voice hoarse from the impact. "You were in an accident," he replied, his voice tight. "The doctors are doing everything they can." Sophia tried to move her legs, but they felt numb. Panic rose in her chest as she struggled to feel any sensation in her lower body. "Ethan, I can't feel my legs." His face hardened slightly, and he struggled to find the right words. The doctors said you sustained severe spinal injuries. They're doing everything they can, but he trailed off, unable to continue. Her heart sank. The world around her seemed to blur as the weight of the situation settled on her shoulders. How could this be happening? She had always been so strong, so independent. Now, she was trapped in her own body, helpless and dependent on others. As the hours passed, Sophia's condition was further assessed. The prognosis wasn't good. The doctors confirmed that the damage to her spinal cord was extensive. Her lower body was paralyzed, and the chance of regaining mobility seemed slim. They promised to continue monitoring her progress, but the reality was clear. Sophia's life had changed forever. Ethan stayed by her side, though his presence didn't offer the comfort it once did. As the days wore on, Sophia noticed a shift in his behavior. Where he had once been loving and supportive, he now seemed distant, almost detached. He wasn't the same man who had promised to stand by her, no matter what. She didn't understand what was happening, but the pain of his growing distance was becoming just as unbearable as the injury itself. It wasn't long before the tension in the hospital room became too much to ignore. One night, as Sophia lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she overheard a conversation between Ethan and his mother, Margaret Blackwood. She had heard Margaret's name many times, but she had never quite understood the woman's animosity toward her. Margaret was known to be a sharp-tongued woman, but Sophia had always hoped their relationship would improve with time. That hope was quickly dashed as she overheard their conversation through the thin hospital walls. "I can't do this anymore, Mom." Ethan's voice was filled with frustration and disbelief. "She's not the same person anymore. How am I supposed to live with someone who can't even take care of herself? I can't handle this kind of responsibility." "You don't have to," Margaret replied coolly. "You're not married to her yet. We can still get control of the business and her inheritance. I've already made arrangements." Sophia's heart stopped. Control of her business? Her inheritance? The words sent a chill down her spine. She hadn't expected this betrayal from the two people she had trusted most in the world. Ethan, her fiancé, and Margaret, his mother. "Just leave her here in the hospital. Let her think you're taking care of her while we take what's ours. She'll be out of the picture soon enough," Margaret continued, her voice laced with malice. "Once she's out of the way, we can take over everything. The restaurant, the properties, everything." Sophia's stomach twisted in horror. She had heard enough. The very people she had loved and trusted were planning her downfall, exploiting her vulnerability for their own gain. It was a betrayal unlike anything she had ever imagined. The nurse who had been tending to Sophia, Catherine King, had overheard the conversation as well. Catherine, who had always been kind and attentive to Sophia, couldn't let this go unnoticed. She quietly approached the bed, making sure Ethan and Margaret were no longer in earshot. In a low voice, she whispered, "Sophia, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I heard everything." Sophia, still in shock, looked up at Catherine. "You heard what they were planning?" Catherine nodded solemnly. "I did, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. I'm going to help you." Sophia, stunned by the betrayal, was initially unsure of what to do. But Catherine's words ignited something within her. Instead of letting Ethan and Margaret destroy her, she vowed to fight back. She would not be a victim. She would take control of her life, of her future. With Catherine's help, she would expose their plan to the world and make sure they paid for what they had done. "I won't let them win," Sophia whispered, her voice filled with determination. "I will make sure they regret this." And with that, the wheels of revenge were set in motion. But Sophia wasn't going to do it alone. Catherine, her trusted nurse and confidant, was now her ally in a battle she never imagined she would fight. What started as a nightmare was quickly transforming into an opportunity for redemption. An opportunity for Sophia to reclaim her life, her business, and her dignity. Sophia Parker lay in her hospital bed, the weight of what she had overheard still pressing down on her chest. Ethan, the man she had planned to spend the rest of her life with, and Margaret, his mother, both had been conspiring to steal her wealth and abandon her. The shock was almost too much to bear, but the fire inside her was igniting something she hadn't realized she still had. the will to fight. As days passed, Sophia's recovery was slow. The doctors did their best, but the news remained grim. She would be in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Her body, once so full of energy and vitality, now felt foreign to her. Every small task became a challenge. Simple things like brushing her hair, getting dressed, or moving from the bed to a chair were now impossible without help. Yet, in all the pain and frustration, Sophia clung to one thing. She would not be defeated. The hospital room became a prison, and the walls seemed to close in on her as she realized her life would never be the same again. But the conversation she had overheard between Ethan and Margaret was a new kind of prison. A betrayal that cut deeper than any injury could. Sophia had spent the last few days in a haze, trying to adjust to her new reality. But when Catherine, the kind nurse, had approached her that night and whispered those words, everything changed. Catherine had become more than just a nurse to her. She was her ally, a confidant, someone who would help her take back control of her life. Sophia's voice was shaky but determined as she whispered back, "I won't let them get away with it. I won't let them take everything I've worked for." Catherine nodded, her face hardening with resolve. "I'll help you expose them, Sophia. I'll make sure they pay for what they've done." The two women didn't waste any more time. Sophia couldn't afford to sit back and wait while Ethan and Margaret carried out their plans. She had to act quickly. She needed to stop them before they could follow through with their scheme. The next day, Catherine approached Sophia with a plan. "I have a contact who can help us. His name is Jake Harris. He's a police officer, someone I've known for years. He's a good man and I trust him. He can help us get the proof we need." Sophia's heart fluttered with hope. For the first time in days, she felt like she had some control. "What do we need to do?" Catherine leaned in, speaking softly. "We need to get a recording of Ethan and Margaret's conversation. The one you overheard. I know it's risky, but if we can get it on tape, we'll have solid evidence of their betrayal. We can use that to expose them." Sophia's hands clenched the sides of her blanket as she steeled herself. "We'll do whatever it takes." A few days later, Catherine had arranged for Jake Harris to meet with them. Sophia, still weak and confined to her bed, had been told the plan would take time. But Jake was efficient, and his presence made Sophia feel safer. He was tall, with a calm demeanor that put her at ease. When he walked into her hospital room, he gave her a reassuring smile. "Hello, Sophia. I'm Jake Harris. I know this is a lot to process, but we'll make sure you get justice." Sophia tried to return his smile, though her heart was heavy. "Thank you, Jake. I don't know what to say. I never thought Ethan and his mother could do something like this." Jake gave her a sympathetic look. "Betrayal comes from places you least expect. We're going to make sure they can't hurt you anymore." Catherine handed Jake the recording of Ethan and Margaret's conversation. Sophia could see the anger flash across his face as he listened to the tape. He didn't speak for a moment, simply taking it all in. Finally, he spoke, his voice filled with determination. "This is what we need to bring them down. Now, we need to make sure the public hears this. Once people know what they've been planning, they'll be finished." Jake's next move was to get the recording into the hands of the right people. He worked quickly, sending the audio to a few trusted journalists and contacting social media influencers who could help amplify the story. Within hours, the recording of Ethan and Margaret's plot went viral. News outlets picked it up, and soon, the city was buzzing with the shocking revelation. The backlash was immediate. Ethan and Margaret, once respected members of Charlotte's high society, were now the subject of scorn and ridicule. They were exposed for the greedy, callous people they were. Sophia's betrayal had sparked outrage, and people were rallying around her, offering support and demanding justice. However, while public opinion was shifting, Ethan and Margaret were not ones to back down easily. The humiliation was too much for them to handle. Margaret, in particular, was furious. She had always believed she was entitled to Sophia's inheritance. And now, the very woman she had despised for years was ruining everything. Ethan, too, was livid. His initial distance from Sophia had turned into a cold resolve. Despite the public scandal, he still couldn't bring himself to face the reality of his actions. He couldn't accept that his plans had been exposed, and he couldn't let go of the money and control he believed should be his. Determined to finish what they had started, Ethan and Margaret decided to take matters into their own hands. They believed that Sophia's public disgrace could be turned into an opportunity for them to regain control. But they had underestimated the resolve of the woman they thought they had broken. That evening, while Sophia lay in her hospital bed, Catherine came to her with urgent news. "Sophia, I've just received a tip. Ethan and his mother are planning to come to the hospital tonight. They're going to finish what they started." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, finish it?" "They're coming to do more than just talk. They plan to make sure you don't survive. They think if you're out of the way, they can take control of your business and your money without anyone questioning them." Sophia's hands clenched into fists. Anger surged within her. "They want to kill me? After everything they've done, they think they can just finish me off." "We can't let them," Catherine replied firmly. "I've already alerted Jake. He's on his way and he's bringing backup. But we need to be ready. We need to act fast." Sophia's mind raced. She couldn't let Ethan and Margaret get away with it. They had tried to break her, but she wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. As night fell, the tension in the hospital grew. Sophia lay still in her bed, the quiet hum of the machines around her the only sound in the room. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, waiting for Ethan and Margaret to make their move. She was ready for them. She wouldn't let them take everything from her. The door to her room creaked open, and in walked Ethan and Margaret, their faces dark with anger and determination. They had come to finish the job. "Ethan," Sophia's voice was cold, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of him. "I didn't think you would have the courage to face me after everything you've done." Margaret sneered. "You should have stayed out of the way, Sophia. You should have known your place." Ethan stepped forward, his face contorted with frustration. "You don't understand. This was always about survival, about securing a future. You were just in the way." Before Sophia could respond, the door to her room burst open, and Officer Jake Harris, along with 2 other officers, stormed in. They moved swiftly, handcuffing Ethan and Margaret before either could react. "You're under arrest for conspiracy and attempted murder," Jake said, his voice calm but authoritative. Ethan and Margaret were stunned, their faces going pale as they realized their plans had been foiled. Their moment of triumph had vanished in an instant. The police officers quickly took them into custody, and they were led out of the hospital room, their reputations destroyed. Sophia watched as the 2 people who had betrayed her were taken away. She had done it. She had taken control of her life and her future. The vengeance she had craved had been served. But more than that, she had reclaimed her dignity, her strength, and her sense of self-worth. The air in the hospital room felt different now. The tension that had weighed heavily on Sophia for days had finally lifted, and in its place was a sense of relief, though a deep sadness still lingered. Ethan and Margaret Blackwood were gone, arrested for their conspiracy to steal her life away. The police had enough evidence now, and their plans had been exposed to the world. What should have been a moment of victory, however, felt more like the end of a long, painful chapter in Sophia's life. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, media attention, and visits from her lawyer. Sophia's life, which had been so carefully curated, had been upended. Yet, amid the chaos, there was one constant: Catherine King. Catherine, the nurse who had become Sophia's ally, was by her side every step of the way. She had been there when the betrayal was uncovered, and she had been the one to encourage Sophia to fight back. Without her, Sophia wasn't sure where she would be. Catherine had helped her navigate the legal hurdles, given her emotional support, and helped her find the strength she needed to face the future. As the days passed, Sophia's physical recovery continued at a slow pace. The doctors were optimistic that with time and intense rehabilitation, she might regain some limited movement in her legs. However, they were quick to remind her that it would take years, if not longer, to achieve any meaningful results, and that was if she was lucky. Sophia could feel the weight of the doctor's words pressing down on her. Her life had been forever altered by the accident, and the emotional scars from Ethan and Margaret's betrayal were just as deep. But in the quiet moments, when the hospital room was still and her thoughts were her own, something inside her shifted. She wasn't going to let herself become a victim. She had spent too many years building her empire, and she wouldn't let these setbacks destroy everything she had worked for. One evening, as Sophia sat in her hospital room, staring out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance, she heard a soft knock on the door. She turned to see Catherine standing there, a warm smile on her face. "Hey, how are you feeling today?" Catherine asked, stepping into the room with a tray of food. Sophia sighed but smiled faintly. "Better, I suppose, but I'm not sure where to start. I still can't believe everything that's happened. Ethan, Margaret, it's all been so much." Catherine set the tray on the table beside the bed and sat down next to her. "I know it's hard, but you've made it through the worst of it. They thought they could break you, but here you are, still standing. And you're not alone." Sophia met her eyes, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Catherine. You've been my rock through all of this." Catherine smiled softly. "That's what friends are for. And I want to help you get through the next part, too. I know you're probably overwhelmed with everything, but now that you've taken back control, it's time to think about the future. What are you going to do next?" Sophia looked at her hands, still trembling slightly from the shock of it all. "I don't know. I've lost so much. My life as I knew it is gone. But I don't want to give up. I can't." Catherine nodded, understanding. "You don't have to give up, Sophia. You've got options. And you've got a lot of people supporting you. If you want, I can help you turn this tragedy into something positive. Something that could help others." Sophia's eyes lit up with the faintest glimmer of hope. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking," Catherine said carefully. "You've got all this wealth, all this inheritance from your father. What if you used it to create something meaningful? Something that could help people like you, people who need medical care and support but can't afford it. A hospital for the disabled, a place where people can receive free treatment, and where others can learn from your strength." Sophia was silent for a long moment, considering the idea. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about creating something that could leave a legacy, a purpose beyond her pain. "I could do that," Sophia said, her voice gaining strength. "I could help others who are struggling just like I am. I could create a space where people feel like they matter, where they have a chance." Catherine smiled, proud of her friend. "Exactly. You have the resources and you've got the heart. You could give back in a way that would make a real difference." The decision was made. Once Sophia had fully recovered from her injuries and regained enough strength, she began working on her new project. She sold half of her properties, including the restaurant, which had once been the pride of her life, and invested the proceeds into opening a hospital for disabled people. The planning was meticulous. Sophia knew that building a hospital wouldn't be easy, especially under the circumstances, but she was determined. With Catherine by her side as a trusted advisor, Sophia worked tirelessly with architects, doctors, and various experts to bring her vision to life. Months passed, and the hospital slowly began to take shape. Sophia's vision was clear. She wanted to create a facility that was not only a place for physical rehabilitation, but also one for emotional healing. She wanted a place where people with disabilities could come and find hope, not just in their physical recovery but in their lives as a whole. The hospital would provide free treatment to those who couldn't afford care, and Sophia would use her resources to offer financial support to other medical initiatives as well. It wasn't just about her own healing. It was about giving others the tools and opportunities they needed to rebuild their lives, just as she was doing. As the hospital neared completion, Sophia found herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally. She had come to terms with the fact that her life had changed forever, but she was no longer the woman who had been betrayed and broken. She had rebuilt herself, piece by piece, and now she was building something that would help countless others. The day the hospital opened was a monumental one. It wasn't just the opening of a new medical facility. It was the opening of a new chapter in Sophia's life, a chapter defined by purpose, resilience, and strength. Sophia stood at the entrance, her wheelchair a symbol of her journey. As she looked out over the bustling hospital grounds, She saw patients being brought in, doctors and nurses preparing to give the best care they could, and staff members working diligently to make the facility run smoothly. Catherine stood beside her, her hand gently resting on Sophia's shoulder. "You did it," Catherine said softly. "You've turned everything around." Sophia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "We did it. Together." And with that, the Hope Rehabilitation Center officially opened its doors, a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. The patients, the families, and the staff all came together to celebrate not just the opening of a hospital, but the beginning of a community. A community built on compassion, resilience, and the unwavering belief that no matter the obstacles in life, there was always hope. Sophia's life had come full circle. The woman who had once been betrayed and broken by the people she loved now stood as a symbol of hope and healing. She had taken her pain and transformed it into something that would change lives, something that would outlast her own suffering. As the weeks and months passed, the hospital became more than just a place of treatment. It became a sanctuary for those who had nowhere else to turn. Sophia's dedication to her cause never wavered, and the hospital staff, many of whom had seen firsthand the depths of her determination, were equally committed to the mission. Sophia had built something beautiful out of the ashes of her betrayal. The hospital was thriving, and Sophia was living a life of purpose. She had reclaimed her future, and in doing so, she had created a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The Hope Rehabilitation Center had been open for months, and its success was undeniable. Sophia Parker, once trapped by the pain of betrayal and the shock of her accident, now stood as a beacon of hope for countless others. The hospital, designed to serve as a sanctuary for those with disabilities and chronic conditions, was thriving. Patients were recovering, doctors were giving their best, and the community that had supported Sophia from the start was fully invested in the mission of the center. Despite the outward success, the emotional toll of Sophia's journey had not disappeared. The betrayal from Ethan and Margaret, the woman who had once been her future mother-in-law and the man who was supposed to be her life partner, still haunted her. The scars weren't visible, but they were deep, woven into the very fabric of her existence. Sophia had learned to live with the physical limitations of her injury, but the psychological wounds from her betrayal were more difficult to heal. She spent most of her days in meetings with medical staff, coordinating patient care, overseeing new therapies, and ensuring the center's operations ran smoothly. But each time she closed her eyes at night, she remembered the coldness in Ethan's eyes when he had abandoned her, and the anger in Margaret's voice as she had conspired to take everything from her. Despite all of this, there was something that made Sophia press forward every day: her commitment to the patients who relied on her. Every time she saw a patient making progress, or heard their families thank her for the care they received, her heart swelled with pride. This wasn't just about her. It was about providing a lifeline to people who had nowhere else to turn. She had built something lasting, something that meant more than the wealth she had inherited, and the pain she had suffered. One day, as she was working in her office, reviewing the plans for the center's upcoming expansion, there was a knock on the door. Catherine King, the nurse who had stood by her side since the beginning, walked in with a bright smile. Catherine had become more than a friend. She was like family to Sophia. "Hey, Sophia," Catherine said, sitting down across from her. "We've been getting some wonderful feedback from the patients. Everyone is so grateful for everything you've done." Sophia smiled warmly, her heart always lifted by the support from her team. "I'm glad to hear that, but there's still so much more to do." Catherine nodded. "I know. You're always thinking ahead, always striving for more. But I wanted to talk to you about something. Something personal." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" Catherine hesitated for a moment before continuing, her voice softer. "I think it's time to address the past, Sophia. I've seen how much this has affected you, how much Ethan and his mother's betrayal still weighs on you. You've done so much for everyone else, but you haven't fully healed from everything you went through." Sophia leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Catherine was right. Despite everything she had built, she hadn't given herself the chance to truly heal. She had buried the pain, channeled it into the hospital and the patients she helped. But deep down, She knew there were still things she needed to confront. "I don't know if I'm ready to go back to that," Sophia admitted quietly. "It still hurts. And I feel like if I face it, it might undo everything I've worked for." Catherine's eyes softened with understanding. "You don't have to do it alone. But I think it's important to face the past. Not to let it define you, but to put it to rest so you can move forward. You've built a future here, Sophia. But you need to take control of your past too." Sophia took a deep breath. "You're right, Catherine. Maybe it's time." As the weeks went by, Sophia made the decision to reach out to her lawyer. She hadn't spoken to him since the arrests of Ethan and Margaret. She knew that there were still legal matters left to settle, especially in terms of her inheritance and the distribution of her father's assets. But there was also the lingering question. Should she press charges against Ethan for what he had tried to do to her? Should she pursue a legal battle against Margaret for the conspiracy? She sat down with her lawyer one morning, her mind made up. She wasn't going to let the past hang over her any longer. If there was a way to bring closure to what had happened, she would take it. The betrayal she had suffered had to be acknowledged, not just by her, but by the world. Her lawyer, David Matthews, was a seasoned attorney with a reputation for handling high-profile cases. He had helped Sophia navigate her father's estate and had been crucial in her battle against Ethan and Margaret. As they sat across from each other in his office, Sophia's voice was steady, but there was a hint of vulnerability that she could no longer hide. "I'm ready to move forward," Sophia said. "I want to settle everything, close the chapter on Ethan and Margaret once and for all. I want to make sure they can't hurt anyone else." David nodded. "Understood. We'll move forward with the legal proceedings to ensure that they no longer have access to your inheritance. We'll make sure there are no loopholes that they can exploit. As for Ethan, we can pursue a civil case against him for the emotional distress he caused you and the damages to your business. But I'll leave it to you whether you want to press criminal charges for the conspiracy and attempted murder." Sophia paused, thinking carefully. "No criminal charges. Not right now. I don't need to send him to prison. He's already done enough to himself. The shame, the public backlash, it's already eating him alive. But I want the truth out there. I want everyone to know what he did. And I want him to never have the chance to hurt anyone again." David made a note on his pad, understanding the depth of Sophia's decision. "We'll do it your way. But you have to be prepared for the media attention. Once this goes public, it's going to get messy." Sophia nodded. She was ready. She had been through enough. The world would know the truth. And once they did, she could finally move on with her life, truly free of the past. A few weeks later, the legal battle began. The media was all over it, and the public was captivated by the story of the woman who had been betrayed by the people closest to her, only to rise from the ashes and build something greater than anyone had ever imagined. The story of Sophia's strength and resilience spread far and wide, and the public rallied behind her, offering support and praise for the incredible work she had done with the Hope Rehabilitation Center. Through it all, Sophia remained focused. She didn't let the media frenzy distract her from the purpose she had set for herself. As the final settlements came through and the court proceedings unfolded, the public exposure of Ethan and Margaret's cruel plot left them both in financial ruin. They lost everything: their wealth, their reputations, and any shred of dignity they had left. For Sophia, it was never about the revenge. It was about ensuring that they couldn't control her life any longer. As the final chapters of her legal battle came to a close, Sophia stood in her office one afternoon, looking out over the bustling hospital grounds. The doors to the Hope Rehabilitation Center had welcomed more patients than she had ever hoped for, and the community had fully embraced it. She had built something that would last, something meaningful that would change lives for years to come. Catherine entered the office, smiling as she approached. "It's official," Catherine said, handing Sophia a folder. "The last of the legal matters is settled. Everything's in place." Sophia took the folder, her eyes softening as she looked at the paperwork. "I never imagined it would end like this. I didn't think I'd come this far." "You're a survivor," Catherine said with a grin. "You didn't just survive, you thrived. And you've built something that's going to continue making a difference. You should be proud." Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of everything she had been through. But now, as she opened her eyes and looked out over the grounds of the center, she realized something. She had reclaimed her life. She had turned pain into purpose. And with every person she helped, she was healing a little more herself. "I am proud," Sophia said quietly. "I'm proud of what we've built, and I'm ready to move forward." The Hope Rehabilitation Center was more than just a place for recovery. It was a symbol of Sophia's transformation, a testament to what could be achieved when one refused to be broken. As the hospital doors continued to open to those in need, Sophia Parker knew that she had truly found her purpose. She had built a legacy, and no one, no matter what they had tried to take from her, could ever take that away. Sophia Parker had come a long way. The woman who had once been at the mercy of the betrayal and cruelty of those she loved was now standing tall as a symbol of resilience and strength. The Hope Rehabilitation Center, which she had built from the ashes of her pain and brokenness, was now thriving. People came from all walks of life to receive care and rehabilitation, and Sophia had become a beacon of hope for so many. Yet, the scars from the past, her fiancé Ethan's betrayal, his cold abandonment, and his mother Margaret's cruel plotting, still lingered deep in her heart. Though her life had changed beyond recognition, Sophia knew there was still something left unresolved, something that needed to be dealt with before she could truly move on. The emotional weight of her past continued to weigh on her, and Sophia was determined to put an end to it once and for all. The hospital's success had made headlines. Sophia's bravery in exposing Ethan and Margaret's deceit had earned her praise, not only from the community but also from people across the nation. The public, moved by her strength, rallied behind her, supporting her mission. But despite the external validation, Sophia knew that the betrayal still haunted her. It wasn't just the pain of the accident. It was the emotional devastation that came from being discarded by the man she had loved and the woman who had been her future mother-in-law. She had confronted her pain by focusing on the work at the center. But now, as the years passed and the center flourished, the need for closure had never been more apparent. As much as she had built a future for herself, she hadn't fully confronted the past. Sophia knew this was the final step she needed to take before she could live in peace. One afternoon, as Sophia sat in her office overlooking the bustling activity of the rehabilitation center, there was a soft knock on the door. She looked up to see Catherine King, the nurse who had been by her side from the moment her life fell apart. Catherine had become not just a caregiver, but a true friend, someone who had given Sophia the strength to face the harsh realities of her new life. "Hey, Sophia, how are you holding up?" Catherine asked as she stepped into the room, a tray of tea in her hands. It had become a daily ritual, Catherine bringing her tea and a moment of calm amid the chaos of running the center. Sophia gave her a tired smile. "I'm doing well, considering everything. The center is thriving, and I can't complain about that. But there are days when it all feels like a blur." Catherine set the tray down and took a seat across from Sophia. "I understand. You've built something incredible here, and I know how much work you've put into it. But I also know that there's still a part of you that hasn't fully healed. The betrayal from Ethan and Margaret. It's still eating at you." Sophia lowered her gaze, the weight of Catherine's words settling in. "I've tried to bury it, Catherine. I've poured myself into this place and its mission, but it's still there. The hurt, the anger, I've never really forgiven them. And I think maybe it's time I do." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. You've done so much for others, Sophia. But now it's time for you to give yourself the closure you deserve. You can't let them keep holding power over you. Not anymore." Sophia took a deep breath, her hands resting on the desk in front of her. "I've been so focused on helping others that I've forgotten to help myself. I've made peace with the accident, with the fact that I'll never walk again. But I haven't made peace with them, Ethan and Margaret. Maybe it's time to put an end to it," Catherine said softly. "Not for them, but for you." Sophia nodded, a sense of resolve growing within her. She had spent too much time looking back. Now it was time to face the truth head-on. The very next day, Sophia called her lawyer, David Matthews, to discuss the final steps of settling everything with Ethan and Margaret. It had been years since the criminal proceedings had started, and both Ethan and Margaret were serving sentences. However, there were still loose ends that needed to be tied up. Specifically, the remaining legal matters regarding Sophia's inheritance and the future of the Hope Rehabilitation Center. Sophia had spent enough time in the past. It was time to put everything to rest. She wasn't seeking revenge, but she needed to ensure that Ethan and Margaret's schemes were fully exposed and that no one could ever harm her again. When David arrived at the center later that day, he sat across from Sophia in her office, looking at her with a mixture of sympathy and respect. He had seen how hard she had worked to build the center, how much she had sacrificed to move past her pain. "I've been reviewing the case files," David began. "There are still some lingering issues with the transfer of your assets. Ethan and Margaret were involved in some fraudulent dealings, and we need to make sure they don't have access to anything of yours moving forward. There are also some public statements that need to be issued to clarify your intentions with the Hope Rehabilitation Center." Sophia looked out the window, her voice steady as she replied, "I don't want to make this about money or revenge. I've already forgiven them in my own way, but I want the world to know what they did. I want to make sure no one can be hurt by them again." David nodded. "Understood. We'll ensure that the legal actions are public, and that everything regarding your assets is properly secured. But I also recommend we release a public statement that clears up any lingering misunderstandings about the center and your intentions." Sophia smiled faintly. "I want the world to see me as more than just someone who was betrayed. I want them to see what I've built, what I'm continuing to build. My past doesn't define me anymore." As the legal matters were finally concluded, and with the public statements issued, Sophia felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The world knew the truth now, and she had no reason to look back any longer. Ethan and Margaret's plot had been fully exposed, and though they were disgraced and left with nothing, they had become a distant part of her past. The focus was now solely on the Hope Rehabilitation Center. Sophia had taken the lessons of her painful journey and channeled them into something meaningful, something that would outlast her, something that would continue to help people long after she was gone. The center had grown to be more than a hospital. It had become a place of healing and community, where people found not only medical care but hope. The day finally came when Sophia stood in front of the staff, her friends, and the community at the center, preparing for the next phase in the hospital's growth. It had been a long road, but the center had grown beyond her expectations. With the help of the medical team, the volunteers, and Catherine, she had built something that was truly a legacy of compassion. "This is a new chapter for all of us," Sophia said, addressing the gathered staff. "What we've created here isn't just a rehabilitation center. It's a family, a place where healing goes beyond the physical. We're here to help each other, to rebuild not just bodies, but spirits. And together, we're going to continue changing lives." The room filled with applause, but for Sophia, it wasn't about the recognition. It was about the work, the lives they were touching, the families they were helping. She had come to realize that this was her true calling. Not just the wealth, not the revenge, but the service to others. As the crowd dispersed and the day came to a close, Catherine walked over to Sophia, who was standing quietly in the hallway. "You did it, Sophia. You made it through. And look at what you've built." Sophia looked at Catherine with a smile, her heart light. "I couldn't have done it without you. Without the team, without everyone who believed in me." Together, they stood in the quiet of the hallway, watching as patients and staff alike moved through the building. Sophia had found peace. She had turned her pain into purpose and had created something lasting out of her suffering. She had healed, and in doing so had helped others heal too. As the sun set on another busy day at the Hope Rehabilitation Center, Sophia felt a profound sense of contentment. She had conquered the darkest moments of her life, and now she was finally at peace. Her future was no longer overshadowed by betrayal. It was hers to shape, and she would continue to use it to make a difference in the world. No longer defined by her accident, no longer defined by the pain of betrayal, Sophia Parker was free.